So it becomes important that we understand when we are looking at what it means to be called children of the living Elohim, to embrace that in its fullness of what that means. And today we're now going to look at the idea of being children of promise. There are promises made, and there are verses that relate to the fact that we can be children of this promise. What promise? Well, we're going to read about that right now. Let's begin in Galatians chapter 4. So what he's saying is, look, the Torah being powerless, in other words, the Torah had no authority or power in you until you were drawn and you came into submission to and had Messiah brought into the picture. The Torah itself had no power because you would have to submit yourself to it. If you don't give our government any power, you'll drive any way you want, you'll do anything you want according to even the secular laws. But you have to then submit yourself to those or not. Now, of course, if you don't submit yourself to them, they can blow up in your face. Just like when you live according to the law of sin and death, you end up in all kinds of suffering and death, because that's what's the fruit of that behavior or lifestyle. We have parts of us that will refuse to subject ourselves to the Torah of Elohim. Why? Because we're still walking according to the Torah of me. The way you see the world and the way you think it should be. By the way, some of you have such a hard time with people around you, family, friends, etc., when they don't act the way you think they should act because you would never do what they did. And so you get all frustrated not allowing them to be who they are. I mean, I can't believe they would do such a thing. I would never do that, but you're not them. There's lots of things they would never do that you do, that they would look at you and say the same thing. Why do they do that? I would never do that. More importantly, our Creator looks down at all of us and says, why are you doing that? I would never do that. Remember how events take place. All actions start out with a thought. That thought, if meditated on long enough and thought about long enough, ends up getting emotions attached to it, so it enters the heart, which is why we're supposed to meditate on His Word, so that it will eventually enter our heart. And when emotions are attached to it, then action is what comes next. Actions that are repeated enough over time become habits, and they become behavioral traits. That's when you get people saying, well, I can't help it, it's just who I am. You're right, it is who you are, but you can help it. You can change that. Matter of fact, you must change that. Because you are to transform from who you are into what He is and who He is. You are to conform that image of you into the image that's Him, not Him into your image, which is, by the way, what most people do. Yeshua said, why do you ask me to show you the Father? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. What was He trying to say? He says, can't you see the things that I do are that which the Father does? If you look at what I do, it should tell you a whole lot about the Father. Have you heard the phrase, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree? Why do we say that? Because we see a child acting a certain way, and we know their parent, and we know their parent's behavior, and we go, that doesn't surprise me. I know your mother, or I know your father. You're just like, it's exactly the way they were. Because if you see the one, you actually see the other. Well, that's what he's talking about here. Look, if indeed you have the Spirit of Elohim, you're going to then do the things of Elohim, and it's going to be obvious to people. Now, he's not trying to say here, as Christianity might say, that somehow this is picking on Torah observance. It's bondage. No, the flesh and sin is bondage. You were delivered out of bondage. Over and over again, Paul's talking about being delivered out of the flesh. The flesh is bondage. The Spirit is freedom. He says, look, you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear. In other words, you weren't called just to stay in your flesh or to come out for 5 minutes and return to your flesh. He said, you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Now, why would he talk about adoption? Because the promises of all of this was not given to these people that he's talking to. He's talking to a lot of Gentiles at this point, to Goyim. He's saying, look, the promises were made to the Israelites. But if you go and do the covenant that they were offered, and you covenant in the same manner, what was the covenant? Exodus 19, if you agree to do what I say, I agree to take you as my people. It's not a complicated covenant. It doesn't have like lots of small print and 67 pages that you have to read through. It's like 3 verses, starting around verse 5 or 6, where he says, Moses, go down and tell them that if they agree to obey and do everything I tell them, I agree to take them as my people. And so he's saying here, you can, if you decide to do this, be adopted just like sons and daughters who are flesh and blood. You could be adopted in the spirit of adoption, by whom we can then cry, Abba, Father. In Messiah, we have to understand that there is only one people. That people is called Israel. We need to overcome our seeing ourselves. Now we'll get back to the overcoming as we kind of wrap up this section here. We need to overcome our seeing ourselves as Yehudite or Goyim, Jew or Gentile, free or slave, male or female, whatever, all those other, black or white or green or yellow or purple, okay, handicapped or healthy, tall or short, fat or skinny. I mean, we have all of these things we use. Cut that out. Amen. If you are of Messiah, and if you, when I say of Messiah, meaning that you do what he said, you believe what he believed, you let this mind be in you, Philippians 2:5. Let this mind be in you that was in Messiah Yeshua. What mind was in Messiah Yeshua? The mind to do every single thing his Father said to do and nothing else. You want the same mind as him? Do what his Father says to do. Oh, but people say, oh, but I took a class called Hearing the Father's Voice, and I can hear the Father's voice. Nonsense. You don't hear the Father's voice, you read the Father's voice. Those that are coming from a Jewish background have to overcome. After all, since we have so many of you in this congregation, actually we don't, but that's okay. You need to understand it for those who are listening, because a few of us, but you have to understand those from a Jewish background. I'm not even talking about the ones that are in the Messianic body. I'm talking about those that are still in Judaism. Okay, what do they need to overcome? They need to overcome, we're still talking about identity here. They need to overcome their belief that Mashiach has not yet come. Okay, that's a huge stumbling block for them that they need to overcome. They need to overcome their focus on the fences around the Torah instead of on the Torah itself. Okay, which, by the way, this is exemplified in Mark chapter 7, which is not a chapter that tells you can eat whatever you want, but it's a chapter about elevating traditions to be equal to or to even to usurp the authority of Torah. The Jewish community has to realize that there's a problem where they've elevated a tradition to be equal as if it's Torah. By the way, the tradition of washing the hands, there's nothing wrong with it, and Yeshua never tells them it's wrong. He never, ever tells them that these traditions are wrong. He simply says they're not Torah. So not doing it doesn't break anything. The Jewish community, in trying to protect the Torah, built fences around it. And you could say, oh, that was a horrible thing they did. Not really. No, what's horrible is when they start treating it as if it's Torah, so that if you break one of the fences, it's equal to having broken the Torah. It's just like a Christian freaking out if you don't pray before you eat. By the way, it's a great tradition. It's just not Torah. There's no command to do that. So all those Christians out there, give the Jews a break. You have your own traditions that you've elevated to Torah. This should bring you to the Prodigal Son story. We're not going to read it today, but when you read it, you'll see Judah is represented by the son that stayed home. Ephraim or Israel or the Gentiles, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to ascribe to the one who left, it's really the lost sheep or the lost tribes who left. They went and squandered their inheritance, ended up playing with the pigs, and then they came home very humbly with their legs, tail between their legs, so to speak, begging for mercy and saying, I'm even willing to eat, what the pigs eat, just anything, if you'd be willing to take me back. And the older brother, Judah, he ain't excited about it, is he? He's like, whoa, you never killed a fatted calf for me and made a big party, blah, blah, blah. And of course his father said, but you're with me always. I'm always giving you and loving you and caring for you. But your brother that was lost has now returned. He's now found. This is a cause for celebration. Judah is not ready for that necessarily. Some of Judah is. A lot of them are not. The nations, the Goyim, what do we have to overcome as the nations, the Goyim, or the lost Israelites that they've lost their identity? They think they're part of the nations. Because a lot of you may even be lost Israelites in your genealogy and not know it. Because it's been so many generations, there's a complete disconnect. So what are the things that the nations or the Goyim or the lost Israelites have to overcome? Well, first of all, their pagan Babylonian lifestyles and traditions. They have to overcome that. That's for the Goyim specifically. You're going to have to overcome that. For the lost Israelites, their resistance to belief in their Hebraic heritage and true identity. They got to get over that. And then for both, their belief that the Torah has been done away with, or that it's no longer relevant for them. They have to deal with that, both of those groups.